How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about 30 Days of Night, the movie from 2007, directed by David Slade, and stars Josh Hartnett, who, if you've been keeping up with the channel, we recently talked about H2O. He played Laurie Strode's son in that movie. We also have Melissa George here. Now, I believe she was in the movie Triangle, a really good, underrated sci-fi horror movie on a boat. Definitely check it out. Anyway, this is based on the comic written by Stephen Niles with art by Benjamin Templesmith, and the comic was originally put out by IDW. Kind of funny that Dark Horse Entertainment would wind up working on this movie, but I guess, hey, they know comic book stuff, right? But also, this was a very early movie from Ghost House Pictures. Ghost House Pictures, Sam Raimi's production company, and in turn, Sam Raimi's actually a producer on this movie, which is pretty cool. It can't be understated, Sam Raimi made some really great horror movies, but he's actually done a ton more work as a producer and helping other people make their movies. It really nice of him. But yeah, an early Ghost House picture. But anyway, I guess I should mention a little bit of what I remember around the time this movie was coming out. It always is kind of interesting to see the world, how it was when this movie was presented. And I remember this was, I think, a little bit before the Twilight movies, but not before the books. And the books had a whole big fan base come up, and a bunch of people were talking about romantic drama vampires. And in turn, that led to a counterculture of people who absolutely hated romantic drama vampires, and they said, vampires are monsters. They're big and scary, and they wreck up the place. And, well, this movie turned into a sort of an outlet for those fans. Hey, you want to see monsters? You want to see big, scary, ugly vampires? You want to see the more Nosferatu side where they got the sharp teeth and the blood dripping down their mouth? And a bunch of people were super hyped for this movie because it was the vampires they knew and loved, and they got to see them on screen again. And I remember the concept went around too. There's some movies with such a weird and crazy concept like Sharknado or Teeth, where everybody just keeps sharing the concept. Hey, they made a movie where this happens, can you believe it? And the idea that it's Alaska, there are 30 days of night. I mean, we've all heard the concept of the endless days without sunlight up north, and combine that with vampires, it got people talking. And some people said, so the vampires just run around for 30 days straight? Some people thought it was kind of silly, but other people thought it was awesome, 30 days stuck in snow, vampires constantly hunting you. And yeah, people definitely talked about the concept as it went in. And I remember this movie got a fair bit of talking about people, discussing it and the vampires and stuff. And I remember it being a decent hit. I don't think it made a ton of money, but it was a decent success. And it did get the sequel later on. And I do remember liking it. But to be honest, it had been quite a few years since I last saw this movie. And I figured, hey, I'm doing this channel, and on the channel I'm trying to cover some Ghost House movies, and it's also cold outside right now. It's November, and I'm trying to cover some snow movies, and I thought now's the perfect time to go and give it a rewatch and see how it holds up. And it still mostly holds up. I do want to say mostly. I remember, that air of the late 2000s, seeing this over-the-top and crazy vampire movie, and I remember that spirit, and for the most part, the fun is still there. You can still go and watch this movie and have a total blast with it, and I still would definitely recommend it, but maybe it's something about me and getting older and maybe getting more critical. I do notice the flaws a bit more now. Now that being said, still a good movie, still would recommend it, but yeah, getting older, looking back, I can definitely say, that was a little off there, wasn't it? But still fun and still overall would recommend it. I guess, let's talk a little bit about the plot first. We open up with Barrow, Alaska. This is the farthest north city in America, and they're about to have 30 days of night, hence the title. Now, in real life, I think it's actually over 60, but I guess that just wouldn't make as cool of a movie title. Anyway, no sunlight for 30 days. And we see the ship, and out of the ship comes a mysterious stranger walking toward the town. The classic Renfield-esque character making way for his masters. And we get a sheriff, our main character, Josh Hartnett there, and he's uncovering the mysterious things the stranger has done, but he doesn't know he's in a vampire movie yet, so he doesn't quite know how these pieces go together. Parts of the helicopter have been sent into the trash compactor. A bunch of people's phones have been stolen, put in a little pit, and set on fire. Who did that? Teenage pranksters or something? We don't know, but the town is being prepared for the vampire invasion. We also get the sheriff's wife, and the two are separated. I don't think they're officially divorced yet, but they're separated, and she's trying to catch the last plane out of town, because apparently once the sun goes down, you're trapped here, basically, and she misses the plane, and now she's trapped in Barrow with her estranged husband, and it's sort of implied that the deputy got her there late on purpose to try to keep her in the town because the town misses her. It's a tight-knit community, and he thinks she should go back to her husband. And the movie's actually kind of vague on why they split up. Maybe there was a few lines of dialogue I missed, but I don't think we ever got really a concrete reason. And I kind of wish we had more of an explanation as to exactly why that happened. Why did they split up? But I also want to say, like, if two people split up and they're being vague as to the reason, usually that means something really messed up happened. And don't ever try to force one of those situations back together. If they're not talking about it, it's usually bad. But we don't know in this movie. But anyway, she's stuck there now, and the stranger goes and gets himself into trouble. He goes into a bar, and he wants alcohol and raw meat. And obviously they're not giving him raw meat, that's not safe, but they're also not giving him alcohol. Apparently, during the 30 days of night, it's illegal to sell alcohol just because people need to stay vigilant being that dark for so long, which I didn't know that was a law until I think it was in the comic as well. Prohibition in general is outlawed, but there still are various liquor laws, particularly on Sundays and stuff, so I guess it shouldn't surprise me that no alcohol for 30 days might be a rule. But the sheriff meets up with his wife, and the two of them take this guy back to the jail, where he gives the vague, ominous warning, "They're coming." And that they do. The vampires come in and wreck up the place. There's a really big scene where they get most of the town in one fell swoop. There's only like a little over 150 people here. Not many people left after this attack. A big scene that happens relatively early in the movie, and we even get a Wilhelm scream as someone's thrown off a roof. And from there, it kind of becomes a survival movie with the people that are left. What do we do? How do we survive? We have to get through all 30 days. And even learning these are vampires, how do we fight vampires? And overall, a cool, fun action movie. And again, let's go ahead and go over the pros for this movie. Big pros, the concept, and in turn the atmosphere. The idea that you're up in a town, a full town, no one else there but vampires hiding in the shadows, and your very few friends, trying to come up with a plan, trying to make it from building to building. Everything's abandoned, a lot of it's destroyed. A cool, snowy, isolated town. Always gotta give 30 Days of Night a big thumbs up for the atmosphere. And a lot of it's shot really well. That whole bright lights, dark shadows, snow blanketing everything. I do like a lot of the cinematography, especially when so much of the setting becomes black and white. When that red blood comes in, it's a good bit of color there. But anyway, the red blood, I guess I should say. Vampires. Grungy, gory vampires. Now, I should mention, I feel like there are, in general, about 5 different types of vampires. Yeah, there's some different and crazy ones, but you get the cool, suave Bela Lugosi vampires. You get the teenage drama vampires like in Twilight. You get a bunch of European vampires like Jess Franco and stuff, more on the sleazy side. But the last two, this movie really combines 2 types of vampires together. Grungy, Nosferatu vampires with the big ears and the sharp teeth, a little more on the abstract side. Mix the Nosferatu vampires with the action vampires, think like Underworld. This isn't as much of an action movie as Underworld, but these vampires still do big leaps through the air. They still show up and they totally wreck you when you're in close combat. So mix the grungy vampires with the action vampires and cool looks. And in the comic, they really did go abstract. You know, it was fuzzy snow, so everything kind of got lost in the snow, which led to it being lost in the comic through an abstract art style and really helped keep the terror in the shadows. But in turn, you get abstract vampires with big mouths and sharp teeth, and that would be kind of hard to translate these into film, so they are a little more realistic, but they still did try to keep Benjamin Templesmith's art in here. They still try to keep, you know, the vampire designs and you know, all the vampires, tons and tons of teeth, blood just covering their bottom jaw, which you think if it had been hours since you last killed a person, you think you'd wipe the blood off. You know, whenever you're at a restaurant and someone has food on their mouth, they always say, hey dude, wipe your chin, but no, vampires just blood all over their mouth. They don't care. And they got, you know, that really dull, pale skin going with the snow there. They look really, really cool. And overall, monstrous vampires tearing up the place. A good, kind of goofy, good time. You know, there's this really cool scene where someone's driving one of those vehicles with like the big chainsaw on the end. There's some fun action scenes in here. Lots of stuff you really gotta love. But that being said, the cons. And I don't want to say that there's any big cons in here that just wreck the movie. There's just quite a few little things where you have to say, I don't know about that, or oh, that could have been better. And, for example, one of the bigger ones that works against this movie, the action starts a little bit too early. Now, if you just want a fun popcorn movie, starting the action early, yeah, let's just have fun with it. But I really wish we got about 10 minutes before the action starts, 5 to 10 minutes, of just learning our characters a little more. I mean, before the action starts, most of it is setting up the vampires. And I feel that if we got some character moments before the action starts, then whenever one of them died or whenever something happened to them, we could feel the weight just a little bit more. And I really wish we had just a little bit more character before we jumped into the action, because we jump into the action and we're there, you know? So I really did feel they needed that. And also, we see the vampires a little too much. Now, don't get me wrong, like I said earlier, I really love the vampires in this movie, but there are a few scenes where they're really well lit, and they're standing in the middle of the frame, walking around, and you're like, we're seeing a little bit too much of these guys a little too early. Maybe hide the vampires more in shadows, that would make them a little scary. But yeah, we see a ton of these vampires, and I do wish they were a little bit more in the dark and a little bit more mysterious, you know? And also, we do get some shaky cam during the action scenes. It's not too terribly much, but it's enough shaky cam to be annoying. We also get the action, like I said, it moves really quickly. But I noticed a few times in this movie where I was distracted for just a second, you know, like my cat did something, and then I look back at the screen and I'm like, oh, what the heck happened? I just looked away for a second. So yeah, a lot of this does move really fast. And I guess we should also talk about the fake snow. Obviously, this is a snowy movie, but they said because so much of this movie took place outside, they were concerned for the actors and the crew, for their health being outside in the snow in the dark that long. So they opted to shoot for fake snow, and I guess if it's a health and safety reason, I can't argue with it. And if you look at the behind the scenes stuff, the fake snow was a huge undertaking, and it has to be quite impressive. And for the most part, it looks good. But the thing that really gets me is the breath. They did add in some CGI breath, but it's not enough. Like, you look at movies that are legitimately shot on refrigerated sets or in real snow, there is a ton of breath that comes out of your mouth. Like, in real life, sometimes it's hard to see in front of you when you breathe out, you know? And you're talking Alaska. Alaska, during the dead of winter, you're not even getting any sun. These characters should have shot out a ton of cold breath. And there is some, but I feel that nowadays it's a lot easier to add that in. And yeah, this is something that, just a little thing. You know, like I said, most of the flaws are little things that just take away a little bit. And individually, they're not that bad, but when you start to add them together. But another one, and this is kind of a bigger one for me, is the survival element. And in turn, survival, sometimes, you know, the people argue or the people feel the need to move and hide and stuff. But there's nothing super clever with the survival. And I really wish it focused on stuff like that. I really wish it focused on how do you survive a little harder. For example, they find out that a strong enough UV light can hurt a vampire, but it's really only used in one scene. And I really wish they did something more as a payoff for that. Hey, we found out UV lights can hurt vampires. What if we made a booby trap? What if we made a weapon out of it? And I really wish it was a little more of a survival story. And yeah, I mean, okay, it's more of an action story, but I really wish this movie was just a little bit more clever. And also the sense of time. This is almost a 2-hour movie, I think. 1 hour, 13 minutes. And yet, it really feels like a couple of nights. You know, you don't get the sense of time. It doesn't really feel like 30 days. And I do like the additional time that was allotted to this movie. But I don't know. I feel like 30 Days of Night, if we remake this again, it would be really cool to see it as a TV show. You know, that would really give you the sense of all these days passing. And hey, what would be great is if you could get 30 episodes out of it, and each episode was a day. That would be cool. But I would love to see the sense of time better. And yeah, I don't know. It just kind of feels like 3 days of night, if we're being honest. But anyway, I should also mention the comic. I did read the comic, and I do have a review for it up on this channel. And I have to say, with the comic, there are a few changes. The biggest one is the divorce. The characters in the comic really do love each other, and they're a nice, happy couple. And really, if you read the comic, the divorce in the movie seems sadder because you know just how happy they were. And I don't know, I guess they felt they wanted more drama or something, but I do miss the happy couple from the comic. The other thing, in this movie, the vampires speak a language. It's a fictitious language they made for the film. I guess it's supposed to make them seem scarier. I don't know. Yeah, I could go either way on it. Okay, the vampires speak vampire language and not English. Whatever. Another thing is they cut out a character who was like a vampire hunter character, and he came into the town to try to video proof to show to the world that vampires existed. And he may have been able to shake up the plot a little bit more. That might have been an interesting character. I will say in the comics, when they cut to his scenes and it's in Louisiana, it really is a jarring change from the snow to go to Louisiana of all places. So yeah, maybe if they worked him in better, he could have been interesting. But yeah, he's gone from the movie. But the biggest thing between comic and movie is the time. And like I said, 30 Days of Night, I feel it needs all the time it can get. And even though I said I don't feel it quite had enough here, it definitely has more than the comic. The original IDW comic, the first book, is only like 3 issues long. It goes really, really quick. So, yeah, they actually, most of the time you cut stuff down from its source material to make a movie. I feel they had to add more to this one. So yeah, here's to getting a little more time than in the comic, I guess. But anyway, I may have complained for a little bit, but overall I do feel this movie is successful. A fun 2007 action grungy vampire movie. That cool set running around an abandoned small town. It's not the best thing ever, and, you know, looking at it from a modern perspective and not in 2007 where it's the coolest thing ever, yeah, looking back you can kind of tell its flaws a little more, but still, for what it is, especially kind of a time capsule of movies of the time, I think it is pretty fun. Definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it. This movie kind of sits on that edge where it's not quite a classic, but it's still something people talk about and remember, and it still definitely is worth a watch. So yeah, it has its flaws, but it's still pretty fun, and I definitely would recommend it. And plus, hey, if you guys are getting snow, a good movie to pop in during the snow. And yeah, it is November right now, it's pretty cold, so I'm gonna try to get to some of these snow movies. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should probably be my vampires playlist. And if you guys want to see my review for the original comic, that should be somewhere in there as well. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Vampires playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.